a core kind of part of this as well is shifting our thinking from this kind of neoclassical mindset of the economy being at the top of everything and humanity and the environment are subservient to this almighty economy, to actually flipping that on its head and realizing that actually society, humanity, the economy all sit within our environment.
Welcome to Learning Lab. This is Ma Earth's online community where we're sharing tools, earth skills, and technologies in service of planetary health and regeneration. I am Sophia Rockland. I am our facilitator and host, and I wanted to have a conversation today with Monty, Merlin, Bryant. Monty is the co-founder of ReFi DAO and is also a consultant for businesses working to express their values of ecological regeneration by integrating different technologies into their systems. We will get into that more a bit, but before we begin, I wanted to kind of offer a bit more context for why this session might be important for land stewards. So people who work around the world regenerating waterways, people who are planting regenerative agroforestry systems, silvopastures, remediating degraded landscapes, and making food sovereignty hubs in war zones. I mean, there are people who are working on ecological regeneration in many different ways, but ultimately a common denominator is that funding is limited because we operate currently today in a mainstream economic system that ultimately rewards extraction and destruction rather than regeneration. And so this field, this discipline of ReFi or regenerative finance is ultimately, setting itself to the task of designing different social structures and technologies that ultimately work in service to ecological regeneration. We will get into more of that during Monty's presentation. Stick around for the end of this session where we will be answering live questions from our Q&A. And without further ado, Monty, thank you so much for joining us this Learning Lab, and I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Brilliant. Nice. Okay, super excited to give this introduction, entry-level 101 to blockchain for ecological regeneration. Huge thanks to Matt Earth for hosting me in the Learning Lab series. And very excited to get into it. Let's kick things off. So first up, I'm sure, the perceptions of crypto for people who are outside of the space. This is maybe the kind of flavor that you get of what crypto is about. It's the meme coins, the Dogecoin, the going to the moon, pump and dump, get rich quick, scams, volatility, even Trump himself launching his own coin. So you can be forgiven for all of these perceptions and negative perceptions around crypto, which very much do exist in the space. But I'm here to talk about how crypto can actually be a key tool for regenerating the planet. And so maybe just reserve your skepticism for just a moment, and we can explore this question in this presentation today. But before we get into that, a little bit about me. Who am I? Why am I even qualified to talk about this topic? Maybe a little background about me first. I've always been a kind of techie builder type. In fact, I actually got suspended from my school back in the day for hacking their computer systems, not with any malicious intent, but I just loved building things and playing with technology and I guess disrupting systems. But I also came from an environmental background. My mum, Julia Hales, wrote a book called The Green Consumer Guide when she was about my age and sold 1 million copies and founded a company that was called Sustainability before sustainability was really a term. So I very much grew up learning about climate change and learning about the destruction of our planet was always a core part of my upbringing here in the countryside in West Dorset. But yeah, in 2019, I went to Bristol University. I studied management, economics, and innovation master's program. And it was during this time that this so-called ReFi movement was born. And I basically became obsessed and realized this is what I wanted to do with my life. Ultimately, I did a TED talk then around that time titled "Can Crypto Regenerate the World?" So today's talk can kind of be seen as a maybe updated version of that 3-4 years on in the movement. And so, yeah, since that time, I've helped lead and allocate millions of dollars in the Web3 space. As mentioned, one of the co-founders of ReFi DAO and numerous other initiatives in the space, Regen Coordination, CellOPG, Karma Gap, supporting these kind of projects. Ultimately, all of that amplifying my mission to flow and circulate more value to regenerate life on Earth and really make the regenerative economy real. So let's see how we do. But before we get into that, a bit of context. I think most of us on this call are probably already very aware of the dire state that our planet is in. As a species, we're pushing well beyond almost all of these planetary boundaries that scientists have identified. And I really do think some of these stats here are actually extremely shocking and quite frankly terrifying. 73% of biodiversity loss in the last 50 years, 90% of marine fish stocks, and 362 million tons of plastic in the oceans. Kind of crazy stuff. And on top of that, I think even very recently, these cracks seem to be spreading everywhere, from the increasing wars and conflict around the world, the social and political unrest, and ever-growing poverty, inequality are growing as well. And of course, the rise of authoritarianism seems to be happening, and there's that ever looming threat of runaway AI, just to name a few of the kind of most current things that are happening. All pretty scary stuff. And really thinking about this, what experts are telling us is that this growing set of problems and crises are actually all interconnected and part of these deeper underlying structural issues that we face. And so we all know about the climate crisis. It's urgent, it's visible, we can see the effects of it right now. But actually, the climate crisis is but one of these set of interconnected crises, what we call the poly crisis. The growing wealth inequality, biodiversity collapse, migration, pandemics, runaway AI. And each one is interconnected and amplifying each other with feedback loops, making them near impossible to solve in isolation. And yet, going in a layer even deeper, the polycrisis is actually also a part of what's become known as this permacrisis, the kind of new normal, where all of these different things that are happening, the ecological overshoot, the globalization of the world, these exponential technologies, have kind of locked us into a new era of global volatility and disruption. And there's really no going back. Crisis is the new normal, the ongoing baseline. And finally, at the root of all that, the kind of root cause, as amazing work, Daniel Schmachtenberger and others around this meta-crisis, the sort of crisis beneath all of this, which is that our systems and our current institutions were designed for a much simpler world, and they can't necessarily manage today's complexity and all the challenges and technologies that we face that are very global and interconnected. And as a result, there's a sort of this breakdown of sense-making, of governance, of coordination to manage and address these issues. And for me, really at the root of that is the design of our incentives and coordination systems, with money and finance being at the core of that, and right now driving extraction and fragmentation and escalating risks. And so, to put it simply, our systems are broken fundamentally, and we're not going to fix them by switching from plastic to paper straws or other micro consumerist fixes. We need deep systems level change. We need to move away from this all hail the almighty GDP and it rises forever, infinitely impossibility. Money and finance is a root technology and coordination system that is fundamentally shaping global behavior and incentives. And today that system is rewarding extraction, competition, short-termism, and fueling these crises. And, yeah, in economics class back in the day, I was taught about this so-called invisible hand of market forces and the laws of supply and demand and these other things. And right now, that invisible hand is steering us towards collapse, not flourishing. So it begs the question, where do we go from here? Is this doom and gloom all we've got? Well, actually, it's that we need a new story for the future of this planet, and that, for me, is the paradigm of regeneration. So what is that? Again, I think most people probably here familiar with regeneration. I'm not going to spend too long on these sides, but just introducing some of the fundamental concepts and underlying ideas in the regeneration movement. How do we move from degenerative systems, go past sustainable, which isn't a very high bar given how much destruction has already happened, and really move to those regenerative systems which are growing the resource capacity, improving life on Earth, and having a net positive impact on the world, not just doing less harm. And a core kind of part of this as well is shifting our thinking from this kind of neoclassical mindset of the economy being at the top and of everything, and humanity and the environment are subservient to this almighty economy, to actually flipping that on its head and realizing that actually society, humanity, the economy all sit within our environment. And so that needs to be front and center, and this kind of move towards ecological thinking and ecological economics, whole systems theory. And one of the leading frameworks in that, of course, donut economics, which I absolutely I love this framework for thinking about the kind of transformation that we need, and really saying how do we move ourselves into that safe and just space for humanity, that green ring of the donut. Is where we both have our needs taken care of for all humans, the food, the water, the energy, that kind of social foundation for thriving. But at the same time, we're not breaching that ecological ceiling and going beyond those planetary boundaries and all of the chaos that will bring. And so, yeah, really what we're aiming for here, this is a kind of North Star of regeneration, in my view, is this holistic wealth and moving away from only optimization of financial capital to really seeing this more holistic set of value and capital, from material to the living world, to intellectual, to spiritual, cultural, and so on. And yeah, so I think also moving on that of just thinking of regeneration in terms of environmental, if you think of the word regeneration, instantly for me it pops in to my head of a forest or something green being regenerated. Of course, that's a part of it, and in the environmental sector here, I've got the kind of ecological benefits framework looking at both biodiversity, air, water, soil, as well as carbon regeneration. But also we can look at regeneration in the social domain. Our communities, our culture, our politics, even our consciousness needs regeneration. And at the same time, in the economic domain as well, it's really not regenerative to have wealth and power being continually extracted to the top. Instead, we need to be looking at regenerative economic systems, and John Fullerton's principles of regenerative vitality come to mind, and of course, donut economics, etc. A lot of great work behind that. Cool. So that's regeneration. And now, what about all this blockchain, crypto, Web3 stuff? Where does that come into this? So would love to just set a little bit of context and kind of take through the emergence of this technology and then go into how it could play a role in regeneration. So first, looking at Bitcoin, which was the first blockchain to be invented. This kind of revolutionary breakthrough in technology that enabled it to work, and kind of born out of the 2008 financial crisis, where obviously governments bailed out the banks that caused the collapse. And the original kind of ethos and principles as it was, can we create a peer-to-peer digital currency that are outside of banks and governments? And it turns out that they could, and it's still going today now with obviously a $2 trillion market cap, and having been the fastest growing asset in human history, which is pretty impressive. And, in spite of its flaws, there are some very interesting underlying values and principles that even I, align with and I'm interested about, open source, decentralization, censorship resistant, borderless money, a challenge to unmitigated central bank and government power. But at the same time, there are some very strong pitfalls and critiques of Bitcoin. And, as so often happens, big money and institutions have piled in, and the original ethos of Bitcoin, I would say, has probably been eroded in favor of just number go up. And there's been an embracing with the right wing and tech bro libertarian ethos, excited by the kind of sovereignty element of it. And of course, there's that massive energy consumption, which is still consuming today an incredible amount of energy. And so really, Bitcoin's core purpose has now shifted from its original ethos to being much more about speculation, wealth preservation, etc. And okay, it may protect you against inflation, and that's maybe useful for the wealthy, but hardly a sort of beacon for ecological and social regeneration. So Bitcoin, interesting. What it's really showed us is that money can be reinvented, but I don't think it's yet showed us that money can really serve life in all of its forms. And so an interesting first experiment, certainly. And the first blockchain. So what is blockchain really? Well, I kind of like explaining it as a special kind of fancy database. Where each block that's added into this chain is basically just adding a bit more data into the database, but doing it in a way that's tamper-proof and transparent, so no one can go back and mess with the data that's in there and change history, basically. So a sort of tamper-proof database, and a sort of way of visualizing that would be thinking about, if you and a group of people were keeping track of a spreadsheet of who owes who what money, or some sort of thing that you're tracking in a spreadsheet. Imagine if every time something happened, everyone had to manually update their own spreadsheet. But then if you came back together, it might not match. Maybe someone did an error, maybe someone cheated or disagree. Well, blockchain gets rid of that and says that, hey, actually, we can create a synchronized database that updates everyone's at the same time. And we can, in a tamper-proof way, and we can see the entire state of what's happened automatically. And that's quite an interesting technological feat that it invented. So that's blockchain, but it can do much more than just host Bitcoin's, cryptocurrency. And it soon evolved into Ethereum, which was a different blockchain that was kind of aspiring to be a world computer. And basically what that meant is it can store many different types of data, not just the cryptocurrency stuff, but actually, smart agreements and saying, if X happens, automatically do this. From that kind of use case, digital ownership of assets. You hear about NFTs, and that can not just be art, but also land rights or identity or other assets that can be represented on chain. Of course, we now see a huge wave of real world assets, as they're called in the space, coming on chain. So stable coins like the US dollar or other government bonds or investment assets can all be bought on blockchain, and it makes it more traceable and could create markets for it, etc. And these other applications here: decentralized finance, payments, lending, governance, and coordination, DAOs, which we'll get into a little bit. But basically, Ethereum unlocking this new digital economy for coordination and various applications that people can build on top of. So much more expansive than just Bitcoin. And I think it's worth noting, especially for people outside of the space who might still have this perception that all blockchains are consuming vast amounts of energy. Well, rest assured, Ethereum switched away from Bitcoin's proof of work model, and switched to this new model, which basically reduced its energy consumption by 99.9%. And basically, it's widely described as the single biggest and fastest decarbonization in the history of any industry, because in the flick of a switch, all of that energy consumption, I think before it did this, 0.2% of the entire global electricity demand was going just towards Ethereum, which is crazy amount. And obviously, in the flick of a switch, 99.9% of this was removed. And so basically its energy consumption, along with all other major blockchains, is now negligible and no longer an issue that we need to worry about, apart from in Bitcoin. But that's kind of separate. We're not building on Bitcoin. And So yeah, I think, that's going through the different phases of the evolution of blockchain. We have, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then there was this next big wave that happened in DeFi. And essentially the kind of promise was, can we take this opaque financial system that's run by banks behind closed doors and it's extractive and etc., and actually bring it on chain on these open, transparent, programmable ledgers. And suddenly the things that only were accessible to elites and big banks, now things like lending, exchanges, insurance, all these other financial products could then be done on this decentralized infrastructure and make it much more accessible. Of course, that was the promise, but we also see a lot of crazy stuff in DeFi, the speculation, yield farming, Ponzi kind of schemes, and all sorts of crazy stuff happening. So I think it shows both the power and potential of what it can do, but also very much the kind of dangers and risks as well in there as well. So that's DeFi, very interesting space, having another resurgence at the moment as well. And then, of course, there's DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. You may have heard of them. Essentially, you can think of them just like digital cooperatives. So we have in the more traditional world various ways of, instead of just having private companies, we can have more cooperative, participatory organizations. DAOs are that, but on the blockchain, and using the tools that blockchain affords to manage the governance and resource management and coordination of those organizations. And I think in a world where we're seeing ever more powerful corporations and how capital is capturing our institutions as well, I think DAOs are hugely exciting experiments in this new age internet era, decentralized and democratic coordination. So exciting to see this movement continue to evolve as well. Cool. So that's my blockchain Web3 Crypto 101 introduction. And so now how on earth does this link to regeneration and ecological regeneration specifically? Well, ReFi, regenerative finance, is what I would like to talk about next. So for me, the vision of ReFi is really a world where communities can thrive, our society heals, and that finance actually serves all life on Earth rather than extracting from it. And so how do we redesign money as a technology in pursuit of life and in support of life? Bitcoin showed that it's possible to redesign money. Imagine what a regenerative Bitcoin could look like and how much impact that could have. And how do we empower people, stewards, regenerative farmers, cooperative landowners, local communities should be the heroes of the new economy. It shouldn't be that people doing impact for the world are struggling to get by and have to go seek handouts from charities, but yet people extracting and destroying the world are making billions in profits. Like, we all intuitively know that is wrong and a design flaw. And well, let's actually try and redesign that and change that outcome. And doing that by building these transparent, decentralized systems, using advanced technologies, but for good and for human flourishing and all life on Earth. So that for me is the vision of ReFi, and hopefully that brings us to that solar punk future that you might also be excited about, rather than that depressing cyberpunk vision that you might see depicted in sci-fi movies. I think we can do hopefully a lot better than that if we're successful. And yeah, how do we do that? What are some of the key pillars of the ReFi space? And so for me, these are some of the key building blocks which are being leveraged in ReFi to try and get us towards that future. Of course, there's the kind of underlying theories of regenerative economics, which are kind of outlined earlier in the talk. Then there's the blockchain, Web3, DeFi stuff, which I've also just spoken about. And then these other ones as well. I think we've got to leverage artificial intelligence and bring that into these next generation systems. And there's the kind of decentralized science and measurement, reporting, verification technologies, which are a key part of actually, validating what's going on in the world and having robust methodologies for understanding the world. And then I think that another core element of this, something I'm intimately involved in, is the kind of community building element and the culture and the means. We need to bring many more people into this movement and really make it a global movement and bring more people and resources to really scale up the work that we're doing. So yeah, that's the kind of theory in practice. But what does that actually look like in practice? Well, I think this is a kind of an example, kind of 3 stages of classic ReFi models, basically. So in the first step, you have some form of planet positive action. Maybe you're doing some regenerative farming practices or agriculture. Maybe you're cleaning oceans, doing circular economy, renewable energy, whatever that planet positive action may be. We then need some way to measure, report, and verify what's going on, and whether that's people on the ground or smart sensors, satellites, something to really represent what's going on the ground and bring that into the digital world in a verifiable way. And then what we can do in ReFi as well is actually bring that data on chain and create financial assets with that as well, whether that's ecological asset credits or investment vehicles. And, these are some quite technical words here, but they're just sort of different DeFi and Web3 primitives that exist to help us, guide financial resources in different ways. And so ultimately that aim is to make impact equal profits. Would be a kind of one of our guiding North Stars. And the role of Web3 within that is, creating that more, creating the infrastructure to make it more decentralized, transparent, interoperable, all the things that I've kind of already spoken about a bit earlier in the talk. And so yeah, we did this state of ReFi industry report that I've been working on with Carbon Copy and a few others in the space to each year try and do a sort of snapshot analysis of what this ReFi movement is and who are the kind of leading product solutions apps in the space. So maybe you can see some names or some logos there that you recognize. But I think it shows some of the diverse sectors that ReFi touches on, from regenerative agriculture to ecological credits and accounting and reforestation, community building, recycling and waste, and touches many different sectors and bringing those tools to support those regenerative aims. So I think partly it'll be helpful to maybe dive into a few of the leading examples that might be particularly relevant to the audience of this talk today, which is landowners and farmers and people who might be directly engaged with some real world ecological projects on the ground. And so one of the absolute OG projects in the space that got to showcase is Regen Network. And they've built fantastic methodologies and technical infrastructure for being able to create ecological claims about the world and what's going on in terms of its regeneration, and then being able to convert that into a form that can, create economic value. So ecological assets, carbon credits, biodiversity credits really are just vehicles then to reward land stewards for healing the planet. And yeah, so far millions of credits have been minted and trading, and big partnerships with institutions who are buying those credits in the real world, as well as people on chain and crypto people who are buying those credits as well. So yeah, fantastic amount of methodologies. If you've got a land project, you can connect with Regen Network and start implementing some of their methodologies to start creating some credits and hopefully earning some cash. Another one, I think we might even have GMO here in the call, but Sylvie Protocol has developed some awesome technologies and frameworks specifically focused on tree planting and reforestation and sort of getting payments for each stage of the tree's growth. And so from the kind of initial sapling planting and then, even just, they have an amazing app where you just take a picture on your mobile phone and it geolocates it and brings all that data there. And as you scale up, maybe you use drones and even satellite technology to really measure all of the ecological outcomes that are happening. And then as the steward and the tree planter and the ecological steward able to get appropriately, compensated for the work that's going on. And so can definitely talk about the exciting funding round that we're planning in October with GMO for rewarding and bringing more tree stewards into this system. Another one that I think is an exemplar example of land projects that are in the ReFi space doing incredible work is traditional Dream Factory. They're a emerging regenerative village in Portugal that are really at the cutting edge of integrating ReFi tools into their operations and community life, whether that's Sylvie for tree planting or regen network methodologies, or even just running the governance of the place on Web3 tools. And they have been amazingly pioneering in their kind of ownership of the space with this TDF token that's kind of like fractionalizing ownership of the space. So people coming into the community can actually be proper co-owners, cooperatives, giving them access and governance rights to the space. Even, proof of presence and proof of sweat tokens as well, which add another dimensionality to the kind of governance. But basically pioneers in using blockchain to create real world value for real world communities. And this is a model that could be copied and pasted and scaled across the globe to many different villages and community projects across the globe. In fact, I'm hoping to implement a similar model for my family home here in Dorset in the coming years. So, yeah, altogether, this ReFi space, it's still young, it's still growing, it still has a lot of work to do. It's been a bumpy ride since its start, different bull and bear markets, etc. But overall, I'm proud of how the space has evolved. And we did some work with Carbon Copy to sort of see if we can get a track the sort of overall headline metrics for the space. And I just checked, and the most recent stat looks like over 42 million has been granted to ReFi and Regen projects since 2022. There's, over 400 active projects building in this space, and, over 6 million carbon credits and other ecological credits issued on chain. So a lot of activity is happening in the space, and the impact is continuing to grow. And I think overall, this links back to my earlier context setting around sort of ReFi's core aims here is really not just trying to fight the existing reality and all of the terrible stuff that's going on. Yes, it's important to protest that, but actually we also need to build a new model and to build the new systems. What comes next? What is the regenerative paradigm? And the more we can get clarity and actually test and build those systems, the better prepared we'll be for the, in my view, inevitable civilization collapse that is incoming. And so for me, that's what ReFi and even the larger Web3 movement is all about. And okay, so coming up to the final bit of my slides, I'm sort of roughly on time. I might go teeny bit over, but just talk a little bit about ReFi DAO, the kind of community that I've helped co-found since 2021 in the kind of early days of the ReFi movement. So we've done lots of things over the years, but really what I want to focus on, just introduce a little bit, is the kind of ReFi local nodes element, which is our kind of core focus really as ReFi DAO at the moment. And these are these community hubs where we can actually be this bridge between all of these fancy kind of complicated Web3 technologies and all of the finance and the crypto capital that exists in that space, and really bridging that with on-the-ground communities, local action, real-world problems and real-world solutions, and facilitating that bridge to experiment and adapt these ReFi solutions on the ground. And we've been really lucky to see an amazingly diverse and awesome community emerge from all across the globe and doing all sorts of things, from hackathons in Cape Town to using Sylvie for tree planting to beach cleanups and recycling technologies. Incredibly diverse what these local nodes are actually doing, and we've run multiple different funding rounds to kind of support their work and grow this network. So this was a snapshot we did last year. We need to kind of update it and see what the current state of the network is. But yeah, it's been an exciting journey seeing that all emerge, and how it's kind of forms the different nested scales. So this is an example of one of our first bioregional scale nodes, ReFi Mediterranean, basically connecting and coordinating a whole portfolio of different ReFi nodes and other regen Web3 projects in the Mediterranean bioregions, and yeah, developing systems to support them, fundraising, kind of doing what ReFi DAO does at the global layer, but in its bioregional context. So yeah, hugely grateful for this community. Maybe some of you of the call can even see your face in here. But yeah, really the vision that we're aiming for here is this coordination or network nation and building this new economy, new culture, new society, new systems for the regenerative paradigm. That's kind of ReFi DAO's North Star, and kind of bringing in and supporting this abundance of new experiments in the regenerative economy in all aspects, from the attention harvesters, resource extractors, and even the big polluters. All these different ReFi experiments for this new economy. So that's ReFi DAO, but I also maybe mentioned regen coordination, and so I'll just quickly cover what that is before we wrap up. So the kind of idea with regen coordination was saying, okay, well, we've got ReFi DAO and the network there and all of the things going on there, but there are actually some of these other networks like Green Pill Network and Bloom that also have these regional chapters and are experimenting at the intersection of Web3 and regeneration, even Matt Earth and the BioFi community, etc. So how do we build structures and support systems that might bring those communities together, facilitate more collaboration, interoperability, synergies, and even collaborative funding rounds? And so that's really been the aim of regen coordination. And we've kind of continued to build in that direction, and more kind of exciting synergies are emerging. And really what we're trying to do here is build what's become known as a network nation. I've actually just come back from Stockholm, where was the first kind of network nation summit to really progress this idea. But really the idea here is that a network nation is not like a country or a nation state that we know today with the borders and armies and national governments. But instead, it's a new kind of community that is spread out across the globe, but actually highly interconnected through shared values, shared culture, digital tools, and new institutions that help govern and support that global network. So unlike traditional nations that are bound by the geography, network nations are about kinship and shared mission, and they have this kind of local node element to them, where autonomous communities choose to bound together into these larger political structures that actually then help create more global representation, governance, and power that are able to represent those interests and actually have influence on the global stage is the aim. And so these kind of network nations are really only made possible by innovations in blockchain, which help with the governance, the sharing of resources, and coordination across borders outside of the current geopolitical institutions that we have today. And so really that's what regen coordination is aiming to build, is a network nation for the regenerative economy, and hopefully that is a sort of enablement to empower this regenerative movement and bring more people and communities into that. And so with that, we're trying to get more funding all the time to support all these regenerative communities. And we can see that we've started small in some of the programs and are sort of gradually scaling up here. And the last round we did in GG23, we I think allocated 160K across both the global round, but also some of these regional rounds that are now regional funding programs that are emerging. And the idea very much now with GG24, GG meaning a Gitcoin grants round, essentially like a funding program festival where different funding gets allocated to different projects. And the next round of that, we're aiming to raise around 350K to put into various SDG related projects. There's bioregional reforestation rounds that Sylvie's planning, and other local funding programs. So if you're a local community and you want to run a local funding round that's funding regenerative projects in your region and place, please do reach out and we can see how we might be able to support you. And ultimately, this is the last slide here. This is the vision that we're aiming to do here with Regen Coordination. We're trying to support those financial resources that exist in the space, both in crypto and in outside of crypto. There's a huge amount of capital that is there. How do we unlock that to come through these new forms of institutions that are emerging, the network nations, the bioregional organizations, the local nodes, to allocate that then to the real world impact projects on the ground, the land stewards, the farmers, the communities, the people planting the trees, the innovators. And if we're doing that successfully, we then also need to know what's going on and be able to measure the impact that's happening successfully. And then be able to pull that in a kind of data commons that's collectively kind of owned and transparent on blockchain. And then that enables us to report and even create credits that we can, report to the funders and showcase all this amazing work that's going on, which should help us to unlock more financial resources and keep that flow going. So hopefully we can build this regenerative flywheel where we're bringing more and more resources into this new regenerative economy. So would love for people to come get involved with that journey. If this resonates with you, this is an invitation. And how to get involved, I think Sophia might share some links. But if this is your first time dabbling in, read some of the online resources, listen to the podcast, look at some of the other Matt Earth learning labs. There's a whole bunch of content out there to start getting more involved. And then if you want to take it a step further, try some of the tools. I showcased a couple in the talk, from Regen Network to Sylvie and a few others. Just try downloading it and testing it out and seeing if it works and providing some feedback or whatever it is. And then, maybe you want to join one of the local nodes or the bioregional organizations, or even start your own. And there's, resources I can point towards, if that's what people are interested in. And then if you do that, maybe you can then access some funding, whether that's through creating ecological credits or applying to all of these various grant rounds that I've been mentioning as well. And ultimately, with all of that, help us spread the stories, the narrative, the vision, and grow and bring more people into this movement. So, yeah, thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation, and I will happily answer any questions. I see there's a few that have come through in the chat.
Thank you so much, Monty. There's so many different fractal tributaries and kind of paths that we could take, but I think that was a really solid overview of what is a dynamic ecosystem. So thank you so much for your time and also just all of your experience covering this territory and cultivating community in this space. This is the extra exciting part. We have a couple of questions in the chat. Fadi asked a bit more about how to get involved, just noting that they're more and more interested in ReFi, especially in French-speaking countries in Africa. So maybe if you know of any initiatives happening there, but Fadi, we also shared in the chat, more resources to get involved.
Yeah, just a note on that. We're actively mapping all of the various ReFi local nodes and other ReFi communities that exist, and basically providing better onboarding for people to either join those existing communities or support in setting up their own community. So maybe you want to help activate a local ReFi community in some of these countries and help bring more people into that movement locally. So I can definitely, if you go on the ReFi DAO link tree there, I'll share actually another link that's even more relevant to that specific thing. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Right on. Rossi has a great question. Rossi asks, what are some options for smaller nonprofits that work directly with stewards in Latin America? I run a highly impactful jungle restoration initiative with hyper focus on biological corridor restoration. We'd love to learn more about how people like us can get involved and benefit from this. I would add, I think there are kind of, for me, I'll kind of top that question. Like, when we're talking about refi and access for land stewards, meaning people who are actively working on reforestation or, building food forests or cleaning waterways or whatever that looks like. Many times folks are actually out there, in the field, and they're not necessarily experts in, Web3 or blockchain technologies. So I think with that, like, what's kind of maybe the first entry point that you might suggest for someone whose hands are in maybe the dirt on the daily basis and can kind of begin to get acquainted with this work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one of the good things is that you're here and you're in a Mount Earth Learning Lab, and Mount Earth has been a pioneer in supporting land-based projects in the refi space. And I know maybe this is alpha, but I know there's some plans emerging for later in the year to continue that support. So that will be one thing. Stay up with that, and then of course plug into the various communities that I've outlined here as well. And I actually see that the next comment there is from Franz, who is based out in Argentina, and there's a whole Latin America refi community that could help, support the work that you're doing as well. Maybe there's a regen network methodology for creation of a carbon credit or some other ecological asset that you could create for your project. Maybe you could leverage Sylvie protocol to sort of monitor the trees that are going on, and there are several other solutions that can help with that impact measurement and verification. And I do a lot of work with one called Karma Gap, for example, that helps communities and projects document the impacts they're having, and that helps make you more eligible for various grant funding and opportunities that exist in the space. So do feel free to reach out as well if there's sort of any more specific things that you have that you think could be relevant there, and I'm happy to point you.
Awesome. I'll just kind of double click on a part, and Franz asked this question and you did touch on it, but I think we can go even deeper on it. What are some Web3 tools that are actually working today to onboard non-Web3 natives into real coordination aligned with our ethos of regeneration and decentralization? And, I think maybe just to add to that, like, we have these granting rounds, right, that are kind of emergent in our broader ecosystem, and we've shared links to participating in those. So the best way to sign up for those is just to click subscribe when, applicable, stay up to date. And generally there are kind of announcements that are made when different granting rounds are open. But Karma Gap is interesting because it offers an on-chain opportunity for people to actually record their impact. So rather than in that traditional nonprofit framework, submitting a PDF with kind of a list of the different questions and submitting it to a foundation, we're doing reporting a little bit differently in this ecosystem. And I'll add that I think that this adds a really interesting opportunity for there to be more agency in what land stewards actually categorize as important for them to quantify and for them to share, rather than asking, from the giving institution top down what they deem as important. So I love in this space that there's more of an ethos of horizontality, is that we're both offering each other really interesting opportunities for shifting the way that we cognitively and mechanically approach how we reward value making and value creation. So just want to send a shout out to like Karma Gap and also HyperCerts Foundation and people that are really working on interesting ways to kind of express impact in a way that isn't necessarily so kind of traditionally bureaucratic. I have to do a shout out to an old colleague of mine, Angela Martinez, who works with Amazon Watch, and she discussed, bureaucratic violence, really, these large institutions creating metrics that they think are important, but at the end of the day, we know that it's really land stewards who know their land best. They know what land needs best. And if there are ways that land stewards can actively participate in writing the metrics that are important for them to quantify and categorize the quality of their ecosystems, that's truly going to reflect positively on this whole growing space of refi.
Yeah. So quick shout out to that.
Definitely. And I think also what Fran's question and comment is pulling on for me is that there is definitely a kind of Web3 user experience gap. It's very well documented across the space. And, especially when we're trying to onboard land stewards or digitally native people into these tools and systems, it's a huge barrier and a huge challenge. Luckily, I think that these problems are getting solved day by day and getting better and better. And I know that many of the leading ReFi projects and stuff that are out there already have on their roadmap, ways to make it far easier and accessible, just like logging onto a Web2 platform with your email address, getting rid of some of the complexities around wallets and things like that. And that technology is only getting better and better. So that's really exciting to see. And I think this also pulls on the kind of role of the younger generation and the people who are digitally native to be that bridge. And that's kind of the core thesis around ReFi local nodes, is that the people who do understand these technologies and systems can be there to provide that bridge and to support those projects and people who might not be so good at using them. And in that way, can connect them up to these opportunities. So that work and that role should also be compensated and be paid for, because that support work is also really valuable. So hopefully that kind of starts to address some of the onboarding and the UX challenges that hopefully will get better and have that kind of support role as a key function.
Awesome. We have a few more minutes. River asks about what tools are best supporting local bioregional coordination and creating more aligned regenerative collaboration across individual projects. And before we dive into that, maybe I could just offer a little context for what bioregionalism is. I think in our digital community, it's kind of come up a lot as a new term, especially kind of in the philanthropic NGO space as well. Kind of looking essentially, instead of working on a nation state level, regenerating, the United States or regenerating France or regenerating Uganda or whatever it is, we're actually looking at the earth from different bioregions. So what are the ecological traits that may be cross borders? For example, the Amazon basin. The Amazon basin covers 9 countries with different policies, cultures, many different languages. So how is it strategic to actually work in service of specific ecosystems rather than nation states? So generally, and I think it's a much more nuanced topic, but this is the kind of emergent conversation around bioregionalism. So, want to tap that question in.
Totally. And I think, to get to sort of the question around bioregional coordination, in my head, one of the core things that the bioregional organization is trying to move away from is having, very centralized and kind of top down institutions that we're used to with nation states and with other global institutions and grant bodies, to really try and actually support that bottoms up emergence and connection and collaboration between all of the projects and people in that bioregion. And so for me, Web3 and blockchain is a core part of that emerging infrastructure that can create that more network-like structure. And in terms of what are some of the specific tools and systems that are emerging that I'm excited about, well, there's a lot of innovation in the Web3 space around capital allocation and doing that in a more participatory way. And we can see, the difference between a centralized grant body that, has 1 to 2, 3 people who take weeks to evaluate and go through all this bureaucratic processes to reach the centralized decision around who gets grant funding or not. Actually, how do we leverage more network-based intelligence and leverage the experience and the wisdom and the intelligence that sits with the people in that bioregion to help guide and participate in the capital allocation process, whether that's through quadratic funding, or other, variants of that, which are emerging and being innovated on as well. One of the things that we're really working on at the moment is this kind of web of trust or attestation-based network, where we're able to vouch in a peer-to-peer way, say, oh, I know Sophia is an expert in XYZ around local funding programs or reforestation. And in that way, her peer validated expertise should help give her more governance power in making decisions around things that are, in her expertise. And conversely, someone who's not their expertise probably shouldn't really be having their voice overly represented. So, there's a lot of technology and systems building that goes into that, but I'm very excited about that as a kind of next generation DAO governance system that is very much emerging. And we're going to implement some pilots of this in October in the GG24 funding round that's coming.
Amazing. Thank you, Monty. Yeah. And in the chat, and we'll also share this in the show notes when we record this episode and send and upload it to YouTube. We want to give a big shout out to the BioFi network and all the work that they've been doing to coordinate calls and community, really, really advancing this kind of framework and ecosystem. So yeah, and just in general, this is this ReFi space is the place where we're reimagining the different types of conceptualizations, approaches, reporting, monitoring, verification, and all of these things that Monty shared. Monty, everyone wants to know, where can we find your presentation? Can you share it with us later, please?
Well, for sure. And I think, like you say, we'll definitely be uploading this onto YouTube and having it there, so you can share it around with anyone that you want to.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much again for joining us. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today. If you go on our Luma page, you can actually subscribe for episode updates. Our next show is going to be about Biochar 101, which is amazing and underrepresented technology for regeneration. And yeah, Monty, thank you so much. What is the best way that we can support you and your work and just kind of show you love and gratitude for this awesome work that you're doing?
The best way, just show up, come get involved in the community, check out the key links that have been shared there. And if we have these funding rounds, support other projects in the space, lift people up, show them what can be done, and really, let's grow the movement together. And I see one of the last questions in there was about seeing there's all these DAOs and communities, but not many of them have this ecological impact. Well, help us bridge that gap and bring more of that into more communities and more DAOs and more organizations, and really grow it together. So that would be my call to action. And thanks so much, Sophia and Matt Earth and everyone who came as well. This has been really fun, really honing my slides and presentation for intro to ReFi. But this has been awesome.
Monty, thank you so much for putting all of that work into this presentation and for just offering us a really comprehensive overview and a landscape analysis of what is going on in Web3 and regenerative finance, and offering opportunities for folks to get involved. So thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to replay Learning Labs, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can watch a growing library where we are, again, sharing earth skills, technologies, and tools from leaders in regeneration around the world. We've done episodes on mapping, bioacoustic data monitoring, land stewardship, land back, and excited for a growing repertoire to really be in service of people curious and already working on land regeneration. Sign up for updates on our Luma calendar, where you can be the first to find out about upcoming Learning Labs, where you too can join us live and ask your questions and engage with the different presenters. And thank you so much for joining us at this Learning Lab, and we will see you next time. Thank you.